Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar, How to be a UX1 Pro. My name is Laurel, and I'll be your host today. I'm very pleased to be joined by Terillium Vice President Dan Barford. Dan will be walking us through a live UX1 demo. Before we get started, I want to review how you can participate in today's webinar. We're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar interface. The control panel is where you looks like this on your own computer in the upper right-hand corner. During the presentation, you have the ability to send questions to us through the questions pane. Simply type in your question and click send. During the Q&A at the end, we'll answer any questions you send in. I see some familiar names and companies on the webinar, and we're glad you could join us today. If you haven't worked with Terillium before, we're an award-winning J.D. Edwards consulting firm and an Oracle Platinum partner. We have over 170 consultants across the United States with an average of 16+ years experience. We help businesses with JDE implementations, upgrades, managed services, and special projects. I'm very happy to introduce Dan Barford. Dan is Vice President and in charge of project delivery, as well as the JDE practice at Terillium. He has over 20 years of experience and helping hundreds of customers implement and upgrade Oracle JDE. Welcome to the webinar, Dan.
Thanks, Laurel. Good morning, everyone. So I'm excited to be presenting on how to be a UX1 Pro. This is actually a repeat of my session from Collaborate this year in Las Vegas with a little bit more excitement added to it. So what I'm going to do is step through these topics, starting with how you get started with UX1. I'll cover some of the key components and features, talk about some UX1 strategy. So how do you implement this? How do you manage it? And then when we get through those topics, I will dive into a live demo and show some things how you can bring them all together, rounding it out to where you can become a UX1 Pro yourself. So what is UX1? UX1 stands for the user experience for Enterprise One, and it's really an interface into the Enterprise One software that just provides users with a more intuitive and a more efficient way of performing their day-to-day tasks. It's important because it helps bring simplicity and efficiency to a business process, which in turn is going to generate some improvements in quality and overall user satisfaction within the system. It helps promote users to buy into a continuous improvement model where, as new features are released, they're excited to embrace those changes and stay current on the software. A while back, the team at J.D. Edwards within Oracle came up with this alert, analyze, act vision, where the system can provide you with alerts or notifications that allow you to then analyze a situation and take action. You know, you can say goodbye to the days of letting reports run overnight, having to go get those reports, review them, find anomalies within the report yourself. Instead, if you can configure the system to provide you with those notifications, eliminating the need to do all of that useless analysis. You're really only analyzing the things that are important or the things that you've decided to call out. In addition to that alert, analyze, act paradigm, the UX vision is providing users with the ability to personalize and configure the system versus customizing. And I'm going to show you how that all works. And then, of course, extending the capabilities by being able to access the system anywhere, anytime, on just about any device that's convenient. So let's go over some of the key UX1 features and components, and these will all be something that I will demonstrate here shortly. When you take a look, there are so many of them out there. We want to just highlight a few. It starts with the navigation through the system, the way that that has changed over the years, introducing things like watch lists and notifications, proactively sending messages, enterprise search, one view reporting, which is an end user reporting tool, taking a grid format and turning it into a list view, which is a friendlier view if you're going to be viewing it on a tablet or mobile device. You also have the E1 page composer, Cafe One, which allows you to link multiple screens together inside of a frame, personalizing your form without customizing it or needing any development, and then leveraging the capabilities of the springboard within the role-based landing pages. So in order to take advantage of all of those features, if you want everything that's current, you will need to be on application release 9.2, although that's not required to take advantage of some of the components of UX1. You'll also want to be current on the tools release. Currently that's 9.2.2.4. There is going to be some ESUs and some ADF and UDO components that you can get through Change Assistant. And then optionally, you can get some demo data packs that you can load, including some role-based configurations and other things that you can put in the system and therefore play around with some pre-built content. Once you have a lot of these components loaded, you'll want to make sure that you have the servers and the architecture tuned and optimized for performance. To expand on the requirements a little bit more, this is more of a leave behind. It actually breaks down each of the features within the UX1 family and gives you the minimum tools release and whether or not you have to install any additional architecture, additional servers, or other components that you're needing. I'm not going to go through this chart. We will be able to provide a copy of this after the webinar. So at the core of the UX1 is the user-defined objects, or the UDOs. So UDOs are these web objects that can be created using the Enterprise One web interface. So when you're logged into the system, there are all of these different UDO types that you can create and share and help personalize your experience within Enterprise One. So I'm going to talk about how those user-defined objects are important in the implementation of your overall UX1 strategy. So as a best practice for your user-defined objects, you'll want to understand the different type categories that exist. You're going to want to identify the different roles within your organization that will be working with these user-defined objects, and then develop some strategies on how you manage and maintain those, how you apply the proper security to those, and then what it means in terms of navigating throughout the system and whether or not you're able to leverage any of the pre-built content. So some of those UDO type categories, you've got the personal user-defined objects, and these are typically designed by the users for personalization, such as a custom grid or a query that they're going to apply to an interactive application. You've got a user-defined object category of a solution, and this is really meant to meet a specific business process or business requirement. The navigation is designed to help you navigate throughout Enterprise One, and that can include composed pages, workflow-based E1 pages, or the springboards. And then, of course, you have the delivered UX1 role-based solutions, and these are all available for download, and you can apply those to the system and actually just start putting people into these user-defined roles to see how they work within that role-based solution. These roles, this is sort of a recommended breakdown of the different roles that you might need to consider. So your end user, you can specify whether they can create, modify, and then of course view any of the user-defined objects content. And then anything they can create or modify, they will have the ability to request to publish, which is a request that allows you to share that UDO with other roles or other users. One level up would be an approver or a power user, someone that can also create and modify the content, but then they also have the ability to approve and share and apply security to those user-defined objects. There's a content queue that is managed throughout this process so that you can specify where these UDOs go and how they're promoted. And then of course, you have a promoter, which is similar to a system administrator or a CNC resource that would allow you to promote these objects throughout your different environments. So let's talk strategy for a little bit. First topic within the strategy conversation is around managing and maintaining these. So make sure that you're aware of the tools release and what features are available within that tools release, and understanding the support capabilities there. Enabling your user community, so establish those roles and responsibilities, who can create content, who can approve content, and then apply some controls around that so that you can manage how they're rolled out. You don't want it to become the wild, wild west with people just creating and sharing content all over the place. You want to make sure there's some organization there. And then take into consideration how you synchronize across environments. Most of the users are going to be working in your production environment. So if you give them the ability to create content there, you'll have to have a plan on getting it to your lower level environments so that things are synchronized across the board and they don't have a different experience working in a test environment versus production. Continuing on the strategy discussion and talk security. So there are different things you would have to enable within the system. You've got that feature security, which essentially allows you to toggle on and off the different UDO components. You then have action security, which will determine whether you can create, publish, modify. The view security allows users to just consume the content that's created. And then finally, you've got the user-defined objects workbench, which is where all of these UDOs end up as transactions that you can apply additional security, share, and manage from within that UDO workbench. From a navigation strategy perspective, traditionally, Enterprise One users are used to the task view navigation, or they've accumulated several favorites that they use to navigate through. Going forward, you want to apply this user-defined objects capability, like a classic E1 page, or the new composed page, leveraging the springboard functionality, which I'll be able to show you. When doing all of this, understand what some of your dependencies are. So if you want to create a springboard, you've got to have a task view that you can associate. If you want to add tasks that are managed on the task view to an E1 page, you want to make sure you understand what that task ID is. And by linking it that way, if you change the task ID and apply a different version, that composed or E1 page will pick up that change. And then, of course, another example is you can't have a watch list without an existing query. So understanding what those object dependencies are will help with that overall navigation strategy. And then finally, you've got the role-based content. So take some time to go out and review the content that's there. Make sure that it matches the footprint of Enterprise One that you're using. If you don't run HR payroll, there's probably no reason to download the Human Resources Manager role-based landing page. Make sure you're looking at what's applicable to your organization, and then applying that to your environment management. So where should this content originate? Where does it need to end up eventually? there are ways that you can establish a production as your originating environment if that's where your users are going to be building a lot of that content, and making sure that the target environments are those lower level environments. So I wanted to quickly get through the overview and the UX1 strategy because I think a lot of this stuff is just better to show. So I'm going to jump into a demo now. So what I have here is an Enterprise 192 system. You can see across the top, this is the way that I can navigate through the system. I'm not going to talk about each one of these icons. They've been out for a while, but if I did want to go through a traditional navigation and get to the address book, I have that capability, launching it from the menu by clicking all that. Notice I get the breadcrumbs, so I took one thing off that menu. If I wanted to go back to that menu, it's easy to get to. I can back up even further. And if I pull this down, I see a history of my breadcrumbs where I can see the other menus that I've accessed recently and can actually get to those as well. Across the far right then is my user ID, and when I click on that now, there's a lot of system preferences that I have the ability to control, and it includes things like, enabling different features, or is Autosuggest something that I want toggled on or off, or I could turn off the menu breadcrumbs if it's not something I want to use. That, along with several other items, are managed through that system preferences. But because we're talking about UX1, we want to think about the modern way to navigate through Enterprise One. You have traditional E1 pages, which are just simply built with tiles, and you specify the application or report that needs to launch. You can add an image. You also have a more workflow-based E1 page where it kind of shows the logical progression of a business process, and people can access it that way. You can also go into what this is known as the role-based landing page. So this is called, I think, Shipping Supervisor or something. And I want to talk about this particular page. So on the left-hand side, I have a watch list panel, and it's showing me my back orders and how many I need to, or how many that have been released. I've got some dashboards in the middle here that I can interact with. I can decide to turn off particular records and then see the results. I can make this particular chart larger if I want to. And this is an example of something that you can download at no cost and apply to your system if you want to just practice using it. If you decide to change the criteria behind this particular dashboard, there's a way to update that query, and you just simply change the search criteria or the filter, and you can save that, and it will apply to this particular screen. And then finally, over here on the right is a springboard. So what's unique about a springboard is that when you click on an application, it's going to launch into the application that's behind that, but it keeps the springboard accessible. So because you're on a role-based landing page, you're likely doing some analysis, and that often means going through several applications. So you don't have to keep exiting back out to the main screen in order to access additional applications that you may be doing some analysis on. I think at the last check, there was over 70 of these role-based landing pages available. So you can go out to learnjde.com to get more information on what's available there. So the next component of UX1 that I'm going to talk about is the Enterprise One search. So up here on the upper right, I now have a search box. And if I just put in a number, it's going to bring up search results that span across several areas of the system. And this is all configurable. You can specify what different areas of JDE you want to have results returned. And when you return the results, you can specify what's shown. So I see here that a serial number on a piece of equipment starts with the number 350, and that's why this one was located. From here, I can take an action to actually view this piece of equipment. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to provide a second description on this. And we'll call this and then I'm going to share this equipment with someone else in my organization and have them verify that I've set this piece of equipment up right. And I'm going to do that by using the collaboration feature. So when I click on tools, I can go to collaborate and then send email. What it's going to do is compose a message that I'm just going to send to myself. And it's going to have a link in it. Please review. So I've just sent that email off. I'm going to save that piece of equipment. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pretend like I'm receiving that email, and I'm going to do that from my iPad. So I'm switching screens here, and you can see I received that email. And when I click on that link, it's going to open up my Safari browser, but it's going to ask if I want to open this up in the JD Edwards, because I have the Enterprise One app for iPad. So I will say open. It's going to ask me to sign in. Now what you're seeing is that same piece of equipment running right on my iPad in the Enterprise One for iPad app. And you can see the description that I added, warehouse qualified. And I realize as a person who's reviewing this, I actually want to add one more property to this piece of equipment. And in doing so, I'm going to demonstrate a feature called Autosuggest. So I'm going to click in this inventory item number field. And I want to associate this to an inventory item. I'm just going to start typing the word wind, which is not an actual item number. But what you can see is happening is the Autosuggest feature brings up a list and lets me select an item just by clicking on it now. It translates that into the item number, and when I tab out, it's also going to bring in that product model and product family. I can then save this item, and takes me back into my main E1 page. So I'm going to switch back over to Enterprise One running on my laptop and go back into that piece of equipment, and I can see that the item number that I associated there on my iPad was saved. So recapping really quick, what I kind of just showed you was from an Enterprise One search, I was able to locate a piece of equipment. I was able to immediately drill in and view the properties of that equipment, make changes, collaborate with a coworker, and then come right back in and see all of those changes that just happened. What I'm going to do next is show you another UX1 feature that is known as form personalization. So over the years, I've seen a lot of customers who want this particular screen simplified because there are so many tabs, and as they review equipment, they don't want to have to click through all of these different tabs. Using the form personalization, I can combine information from different areas. I can rename fields. There's a lot of functionality built into that particular feature. So to do that, first thing I'm going to do is actually zoom out, because I need to make sure I've got enough real estate on here to create space. And then I'm going to click on this icon here in the upper right for personalized form. It brings me into an edit mode. I can take this blue bar and kind of drag it down, creating some space. Now I'm going to go to this classification tab. I'm just going to bring that entire section right down below, and then click this icon in the corner of that tab to hide that now. I'm going to do the same thing for classification 2, which these are just really my category codes. And then I'm going to hide that finally, the accounting information. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's not like I want to hide a bunch of these fields, but I'd rather just be able to scroll vertically on my screen versus having to click across multiple tabs. Service, I'm not worried about. I'm going to hide that entire tab, and same thing with the attachments. Kind of bring this back up here. Now I'm just going to save this and give it a name, equipment simple. And when I close my Personal Forms Manager panel, you can see now, and I probably could have lined things up better, but I tried to do that very quickly. I now have no tabs across the top, and all my category codes are there. I can just scroll down to view them, and my accounting information is there as well. To toggle between my personal form and no personalization, I just simply change the drop down that's on the top toward the right, and it reverts right back to the original layout. Personalized forms are probably a user-defined object that you're not going to release to every end user. Likely, this would still go through some sort of power user or IT where a specification is written, or some people agree on what they want this layout to be. A BA could make those changes and then publish to share with other people in the organization, which would make support a little bit more straightforward, so that you don't have 10 users that each have their own personal form, and if they need support, it'd be difficult to see what they were looking at. So that covers personalized forms. I'll toggle back over to that just one last time to take a look. So you can see it doesn't impact the functionality. It just lets me change the layout. I could have changed the labels. You can actually force fields to be required that aren't required out of the box, and introduce, you know, some additional things within a business process that help the users make sure they understand what they would need to fill in, and showing them the best grouping of information to help them do their jobs. So the next feature, I'm going to actually combine a few features into one. I'm going to show you some grid functionality. So I'm just going to go in here to the item master, which has a lot of columns and, you know, lets me search and find items. Using a query, I've got one called safety items, and when I choose that query, it returns results based on a query that I built. And if you think about the capabilities of a query, it's really a report that your users can create on their own. It shows them exactly what they want to see. When they combine that with a personal grid, it gives the layout that they want to see and quickly access information that they need. You can save those queries as your default. If I open up the query manager panel, kind of zoom in here. For this particular query, all I did was search on the description of the item and say, all right, if it contains the word safety or if it contains the word cleaner, I want to see it in my results. And it's really that simple. I can preview those results by clicking this find button before I finalize things, and instantly I have a report. So I'll close that query panel. Now, when I want to take this particular query results, and I'm going to change to what's known as the list view grid format. And what the list view does is it really consolidates the information that you're looking at. It actually frees up quite a bit of screen space for me, and it lets you stack information so that you're only seeing the fields you need. And this is really nice for displaying on a tablet or a mobile device or something that's a little bit smaller. And similar to the query manager, you've got the grid format manager, where I'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see how I've structured this, and the tool itself allows me to add additional rows and then for additional fields to this. You can move around the columns that you want to see and change the properties on them, so you can configure how it's aligned. There's a lot of functionality built in to the list view grid. So since I've changed to a list view, I can now add a Cafe One panel because I have all this additional screen space, and that's done by changing the layout. So when I go here, I've got a layout called Granger because we buy our parts from Granger. And if you notice, as I am highlighted on this first row, it's actually pulling up the item on Granger's website. If I change, as I scroll through, now this orange safety flag comes up. I can come down here to the 4-foot ladder, 17-foot ladder. So by linking information from Enterprise One in the grid to a website, I'm able to dynamically see changes as I scroll through these items. And this is powerful because you can do this with other Enterprise One applications. You can do this with a file server if you have drawings loaded somewhere and you want to see item drawings or equipment drawings or service records. All that stuff can be linked together using the Cafe One. And it's pretty simple. All you really do is up here in your personalization, you edit the form layout, and all it's doing is using, if I zoom in here, I was able to figure out on the Granger website with the correct criteria, if you identify an actual exact item number for them, it displays that item, and even though it's doing a search. And it lets me map that. For this particular example, I just mapped the Granger item number in my description 2 field, and that's what gives me the ability to change that as I go from record to record on the grid. It's very easy to set up once you know the syntax of the information that you're linking to. So I'll close that format manager. So that kind of covers the Cafe One when combined with a list view grid that was first populated by choosing a predefined query, which covers several different user-defined objects in one example. So I'm going to go back out here. Now I'm going to show you, I've got a composed E1 page here that I call IT Business Analyst. This was built just using the standard composed page editor. And I simply have a watch list panel over here and some quick access to applications that I've labeled Foundation, User and Security, and EDI. If I go in here, I can see that there are some user-defined objects that are pending approval. Clicking on that watch list takes me into the application where that query was built, and then the watch list was associated to that query. So again, combining multiple user-defined objects, I have a custom grid here, which when you look at the properties of this grid, I'm trying to make this panel bigger. Okay, you can see that of the dozens of columns that are out there, I just have the ones I've chosen. You'll notice that my status field is yellow, and I've done that by going to this section and picking that status. And at one point when I built this custom grid, I clicked down here in the yellow area and it came up with that color. So that's my custom grid that I'm using. And then the query is simply where the user-defined object equals 5, which is the pending approval status. from the query, I was able to create a watch list called pending UDOs review. And let me just zoom in here so we can get a good look at this. So what this is showing me is that the watch list was created using a query called pending UDOs query. And it's got a couple different statuses that it's selecting. And then I have a warning threshold and a critical threshold. And all this does is really change the behavior on how the watch list is presented. And then later on, when I show you a notification, you'll see how we can apply these thresholds to how we receive information from the system. So kind of quickly recapping on this one, a custom grid combined with a query that we then turned into a watch list is how we're leveraging these particular user-defined objects. So let me go back to my main page here. And what I'm going to show next is how we can be notified by a particular condition in the system. So when we looked at the properties of that watch list, I had a critical threshold of 5 user-defined objects that need approval. So I'm going to actually create that condition by quickly creating a user-defined object and requesting to publish it. And by doing so, I should receive a notification, because if I come out here again to my system preferences, there's an option called My Subscriptions. When I pull that up, I have a subscription that I called UDO pending notification. And it's based on this watch list UDOs, which is an orchestration that was built, which I'll be able to show you while we're waiting for the notification to come in. So on the delivery method here, I've asked for it to deliver a notification to me in the notification list, which is the bell icon on the top of my screen, as well as my work email and my cell phone. It will come in as an SMS text message. I can't just put my phone number. I actually have to format it as the SMS text message format. There are no inputs on this particular subscription. In some cases, you might have to specify an input parameter, like an address book number or an item number if you're keeping track of something specific. And then finally, this is where the policy applies. I'm only going to be notified if my watch list level changes to critical. And so we've kept that critical level low. It's at 5. That way I can demonstrate how this all works. So that is the subscription that I created. Now let's go create a quick UDO, and I'll just create a query VX search type, and I'll call this X vendors. So I've created this query, and I just simply specified one condition where search type equals VX. This is where I'm going to take that request to publish option within the query manager panel, and it's going to create a record in my user-defined objects workbench. So if I go back to my IT business analyst page, I'm going to refresh this watch list. So it changed to 5. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back over to my iPad, and I'm actually going to also pull up my phone, because I'm expecting to get a text message at some point. So keep an eye on my messages down there while we're waiting for that. So what's happening is our notification scheduler is on a 2-minute delay. So every 2 minutes it's going to run. Oh, we just got an alert. So let me pull that up. And this is really just a notification. You have UDOs waiting for approval. I can't take any action on here because it's my smartphone. However, in the email that I should have also gotten, let me switch over to my email. Because of how the notification was created, it actually gives me a link right into the user-defined objects workbench. And it's going to ask me to sign in. And I can then just pull up my query and see this, and I can go ahead and approve this. And now it drops off that list. So my criteria now has fallen back below the critical threshold, which means I should no longer receive any notifications on that particular alert. So notice what happened there too. As soon as I closed the application, it's telling me Enterprise 1 was closed. And that's because of how that notification was delivered. It simply let me access that one application that was specified in the orchestration. And when I'm finished, I actually would have to go in and log in through the regular way in order to continue using the system. So here I am back in the main page. If I refresh this watch list again, it does return back down to 4. So in order to show you how that was all kind of pulled together, you saw how I subscribed to the notification. Let me go into the orchestrator. And I'm not going to explain much about what's going on within the Orchestrator Studio, but basically behind this notifications link, if I click on that, we should find the watch list UDOs orchestration. And it's specified as a notification type. If I double click on this particular icon, it kind of brings up the criteria that were used to build this orchestration. So again, there's no inputs. It is based on an existing watch list, which there are any shared watch list or any watch list that I have access to would show up in this list. The pending UDOs review was the one that was selected. There aren't any special rules here, but you can apply different rules to these orchestrations. Here is where the message is specified. So when I received that email, it had this subject and this in the email body. And then optionally, it asked, do you want to create a shortcut to Enterprise 1? And of course, that's what was allowed me to click on the link and drill directly into the user-defined objects workbench. So kind of assembling all of this into an orchestration allows you to, then specify here. You can see the schedule is running every 2 minutes, but this is a simple one-step orchestration that's based on a notification that I was then allowed to subscribe to. All right, so kind of rounding things out here, what I wanted to show next for UX1 is a mobile application. And before I dive into the mobile application, I'm going to demonstrate adding an attachment to an inventory item, but I want to look at it in the system first. Oh, and before, sorry, I just noticed I've got that notification up here on the bell icon. So I chose to be alerted here as well as multiple email addresses. And in fact, I've got on my Mac notifications enabled, which doesn't look like it's pulling up, but I received it through the standard Apple notification center as well. Okay, so back to the inventory lookup. So I'm kind of applying another feature of the search. So because I have FastPath, there's also a search capability within the task view. So I don't know exactly how to get to the inventory availability, so I'm just going to type the word availability, and when I hit return, it shows me everywhere. You can see in bold that it found the word availability. I'm going to go right down here to summary availability and just take that option. I'm going to put an item and a branch in and do a find. So for branch plant 10 on this red touring bike, I can see that I've got 1,000 in my primary location. And notice if I zoom in over here, there's nothing in the attachments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my mobile app. I'm going to pull this same item and location up, and I'm going to attach a picture, and then I can come back over here and refresh, and I should see that attachment in the system. So to do that, I'm going to launch this particular mobile app. Now, there are dozens. In fact, the last count, I think there was something like over 80 purpose-built mobile applications out there. You've got everything from, the ability to view your watch lists to inventory, release held orders, approve POs. Essentially taking a specific process or a component of a process and turning that into a mobile application is what JD Edwards has done. So when I launch this, it's going to ask me to log in. Behind the scenes, the app has been configured to know what the URL is for the mobile application server that's linked to our system. So when I see here that second one down in the list is my red touring bike for branch plant 10, I pick that up, I see that same 1,000 on hand, so I'll drill into the location, and in the top right, I have a photos option. So there are 0. I'm gonna click on there to add a photo and just pull it right from my camera album. I've got a nice red bike available. I'll give it a name, stock photo, and save that. Go back to my main screen here on my mobile application. So, I didn't do much in the way of interacting with this particular item. I was able to verify the total on hand. So if I were using this more as an information delivery type mobile app, I can see and drill into a specific location and see the quantity committed, back ordered. So this would be useful for someone who might be walking around the warehouse or just wants information on a particular mobile application. So switching back to JD Edwards, now that I've attached that, there weren't anything else that needed to happen. There's no batch jobs that have to run or anything like that. If I just simply click find on my screen again, you can see the paperclip icon has come up. When I click on that, it's telling me I have a location attachment, and there's that same bike that I attached from my phone with the name I gave it, which is just stock photo. So kind of just for that example, showing how the purpose-built application can be used to interact with the system, and what occurs within that mobile application does happen in real time. All right, well, that concludes my live demo, and I just want to kind of really quickly recap what I showed. So we talked about the role-based landing pages. You saw the shipping supervisor and the total back orders and all the dashboards and the springboard. You saw how they've transformed the system into a modern user interface with the ability to personalize things. We went through even further personalizing with the search capabilities, the form personalizations, creating your own grids, creating a list view, using Cafe One to link to information, notifications proactively telling you about situations within the system, and even mobile applications, both in the way of the purpose-built apps as well as the Enterprise One application for iPad. At this point, the one last announcement really is, if you're interested in kind of getting more information, we have a UX1 enablement workshop, and this can be anywhere from 1 to 3 days depending on what you choose to be included. We can do things as simple as just providing an overview of all of these features in a little bit more detail than what I showed today, or we can go into full-blown training on how do you create these particular user-defined objects, how do you manage them, help you build that strategy for creating the right roles, establishing the right security, and getting your system configured to support rolling these out. We can also talk about some best practices, or what other companies are, how they're leveraging things like Orchestration, notifications, and all the different user-defined objects, so that we can tailor everything to meet your specific business requirements. So if you're interested in more of that, you can email us at weknowjde@terillium.com, and we can talk about scheduling one of those workshops. All right, Laurel, I've covered quite a bit and kind of had to do so quickly for the sake of time. I'm ready to take any questions if anything's been posted to our questions panel.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Dan. That was a great demo. We have had a few questions come in. A couple of them may have been addressed, they came in and they may have been addressed as you went, but I'm going to go ahead and read them to you, and maybe you can just give some quick comments. So the first question is, on the personalized form, is there a way to have the cursor be present in the first tab item?
That's a good question. And I apologize, I don't know this answer 100%, but we can follow up if we know who the person is that asked the question. What I believe is you can specify the tab sequence on a form. I don't know, however, if that means it will default into that very first field.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, we do have the person, so we'll follow up afterwards with a little bit more info. Okay, second question, can the list view have titles for the columns?
As far as I can tell, in building that, I was actually looking for the same thing, and I don't, they're really stumping me this afternoon, but I think the answer is no, unless that's a property that I'm unaware of. So I can do a little bit more research, but yes, I looked for that same capability when I built the list view on the item master, because it doesn't tell you what columns you're looking at. And I think that has to do with the fact that you can stack them and have multiple rows within a column. So it would be very difficult to provide those labels. And I think the purpose behind the list view is to really simplify what you're looking at to the point that people know what they're looking at. And that's probably not the best answer, but I believe that's what the case is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. How do you set up a notification scheduler?
The notification scheduler is a technical task. It does require another, I think it's actually like an open source scheduling product that may or may not be called Quartz or something like that. Essentially, one of our CNC resources configured that for us on our demo system, and then there are, you essentially just specify things so that you can have a specific schedule for every type of notification that exists. So for mine, in order to accomplish the notification in a timely manner during the demo, we have it set to run every 2 minutes. You can have others configured for other iterations. They don't all have to be the same.
Okay, great. That makes sense. Thank you. All right. When showing drawings from a file server, can we have the FTP functionality on HTTP page?
That's a good question, and might just require a trial and error, like a little proof of concept, because essentially you have to have a way of specifying that URL so that you can get to exactly what you're looking for, and the drawing, I'm assuming the drawing number or however that file is ultimately saved, you'd have to be able to specify as a parameter. So if the construct of that URL allows you to do that, then you would be able to access it that way. And I think it would just be a matter of plugging that in and trying it out.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think that's all the questions that we have for now. I want to thank everyone again for joining, and thanks again, Dan, for the demo, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everyone.